Okay, we're back. Apparently there's a limit of time. So, Satan knows the scriptures. However, evil and darkness cannot be where the light is. The light overcomes the darkness. So Jesus shared the light of the gospel to him and said, "It is written that man cannot live on bread alone." Therefore, Satan had to stop. Shod his feet with the gospel, part of the whole body of armor of God. Now, Satan tempted his mind and heart. Let's go back to Luke. Let's take a look back at Luke here, okay? Now, it's going to take me a minute to get back here because the wind is blowing. So, Luke 4. Let's go back to Luke. Luke 4. And we're looking at 9 to 12. Luke 4, chapter 4, verse 9 through 12 says this. "And he brought him to Jerusalem, and set him on a pinnacle of the temple, and said unto him, If thou be the Son of God, cast thyself down from hence. For it is written, He shall give his angels charge over thee to keep thee. And in their hands they shall bear thee up, lest any time thou dash thy foot against a stone. Jesus answered unto him, It is said, Thou shalt not tempt the Lord thy God." He tempted Jesus' heart and mind. Satan knows that man's mind is weak, and often uses the mind because he knows the heart may soon follow. In Galatians 5:21, Paul tells us, let's go back to Galatians. Go back to 5, verse 21. Paul tells us, goodness gracious, I keep losing things. Okay, 5:21 says to us, "Envyings, murders, drunkenness, revelings, and such like, of the which I tell you before, as I have also told you in time past, that they which such things shall not inherit the kingdom." Okay, so those are things that tempt to bring us away from the Lord, that bring us down from the Lord. Envying, murders, drunkenness, revelings, and such like, of which I tell you before, as I have also told you in time past, that they which such things shall not inherit the kingdom. See, he knows that if he tempts our mind, gets our mind looking, he brought Jesus up, he said to Jesus, he said, listen, just tempt the Lord your God. Okay? He said, tempt him. He'll take care of you. Okay? I think I might be reading the wrong stuff here. Let me see what I'm at here. Let's see. Nope, we're right. Okay. So he knows that such things, testing the Lord, okay? So listen, we test the Lord to see, hey, if I murder this guy, will the Lord forgive me? It's okay if I covet this guy. The Lord will forgive me. The Lord will take care of me. The Lord will lift me up. Listen, it said, oftentimes we say, listen, forgive me, God, for I'm about to sin. Forgive me, God, for I'm about to beat that guy over there. Oftentimes we say that. But we don't tempt the Lord. Don't tempt the Lord and say, He's going to forgive me. I can go ahead and do this sin. That's what he's talking about. Don't tempt the Lord. Let the Lord work in your life. Let Him work His will in your life. That's what we were getting at. Now, Ephesians 6:14 says, let's go back to Ephesians 6:14. Stand therefore, having your loins girded about with truth, and having on the breastplate of righteousness. By not getting into that sin, not in tempting the Lord your God, you're standing in righteousness. The breastplate. Gird your loins with truth, and having on the breastplate of righteousness, the righteousness of not sinning, the righteousness of knowing God and not tempting the Lord, and not going out and blatantly committing the sin. Then he tempted the Lord's Spirit. He attacked his trust with the Father. Okay, let's go back to, let's go into Matthew, okay? Let's see. Where am I at? The tempting Lord's Spirit. let's go back to Luke. Let's see where it is that he tempted the Spirit. Let's go back to Luke. I'm losing myself. I think it's because I'm cold and my brain's not working very well. Here it is. He tempted Lord's Spirit. We're in Luke 4, starting at 6. And the devil said unto him, All this power will I give thee, and glory of them, for that is delivered unto me, and to whomever I will give it. If thou therefore wilt, worship me, and all shall be thine. And Jesus answered, saying unto him, Get thee behind me, Satan, for it is written, Thou shalt worship the Lord thy God, and him only shalt thou serve. Tempted his spirit, tempted his trust and his relationship with the Father. Now we know Jesus was God, but he did also have the human flesh. So he had a relationship with God. He was the model of the relationship that we should have with God. And Satan tempted him. Satan tempted him with all sorts of idolatry, all sorts of pagan worship, and all sorts of other things. See, in Galatians, let's look in Galatians, okay? Galatians 19. Now the works of the flesh, let's go back, chapter 5, Galatians chapter 5, verse 20, idolatry, witchcraft, hatred, variance, emulations, wrath, strife, seditions, heresies. He will bring on the next great false prophet, who will preach you a feel-good gospel, who will preach to you to make you feel good about what you're doing. He won't preach to you revelation. He won't preach to you that the only way to heaven is through Jesus Christ, the blood of Jesus Christ. He'll tell you and make you feel good. Joel Osteen, I think, is one of them. I'm not putting him down, but I think that's one of him, okay? Now, we automatically will fall for that. Look how many people have fallen to follow Islam. Look how many people have fallen away from God and worship the dollar, worship sports, worship other things like music and entertainment. That's where he was going with this. So now let's go back to Ephesians. Ephesians now tells us how we can fight that off by wearing the whole armor of God. Wherefore take unto you the whole armor of God, that ye may be able to withstand in evil, and having done all to stand it. Stand therefore, having your loins girt about with truth, and having on the breastplate of righteousness, and your feet shod with the preparation of the gospel of peace. Above all, take the shield of faith, wherewith ye shall be able to quench all the fiery darts of the wicked. That is the part that Christ was able to wear. Wear with him, above all, taking the shield of faith, wherewith ye shall be able to quench all the fiery darts of the wicked. Christ knew. He knew the scripture. So does Satan. But Christ knew and said, listen, it is written, worship no gods but me. And he was able to ward off Satan. Now, these things are all around. And we put our faith in every little wind that blows our way. But Satan makes them look so good. And we take part. Just like Christ, we need to put on the whole armor of God. Just like Christ, we need to follow it all. Above all, taking the shield of faith, wherewith we shall be able to quench all the fiery darts of the wicked. Let's look at something really quick. James. I'm going to look in James real quick. James 4:7 says this. He says, let me get back to it. James 4:7 says, Submit yourself, therefore, to God. Resist the devil, and he will flee from you. If you noticed in Luke, where Jesus was being tempted in a wilderness, he resisted the devil, and what happened? The devil went on and did what he had to do. Let's go to the next notes. How do we do this? Just like Christ. We don the whole armor of God. And listen, in 6:18, what Ephesians says about prayer. Let's get back to it here. Ephesians 6:18 says to us, praying always with all prayer and supplication in the Spirit, and watching thereunto with all perseverance and supplications for all the saints. Through prayer, we can don the armor of God and ward off and fight off and resist Satan and his tools. And then the Lord will lead us not into temptation. But you know what? Satan doesn't stop at just you and I. Satan doesn't stop at just the lost. Satan goes after the church. He goes after the established church. I found this when I was studying, and I'm going to actually read this. This is text I'm going to read to you, okay? Let me get this out of here. Give me just a second to get it out of here so I can read it. This is text from Satan. I'm sorry. It's not text from Satan. This is text I found while I was studying, okay? This was from, this is The Tools of Satan in the Church. This is by a man named Chuck Lawless. Satan goes after us through congregational division. This is how he goes after the church. Congregational division. And to me, I equated this with the heart and mind. He says, I've seen churches divided over budget decisions, paint colors, worship styles, Bible versions, community outreach, global missions, staffing choices, service types, choir robes, small group curriculum, and church vans. Some of these issues are obviously more significant than others, but the enemy still knows this truth. Believers make a little dent in the darkness when they shoot each other in the back. How about false preaching? After the Spirit. Most of my work is with the evangelical churches, and I don't often see blatant false teaching. What I see is much more subtle than that. Small group leaders teaching unbiblical theology with no internal system in place to recognize or address the problem. No oversight or accountability about curriculum taught in small groups. Theologically suspect material in the literature rack, problematic recommending reading in the church, library, music, lyrics that promote bad theology, poor theology of Bible text. Once again, back to the heart and mind. Family breakdown. I remember the first time I heard about two believers divorcing. A teenage believer raised in a non-Christian home. I just assumed things like divorce didn't happen among church people. I also recall the devastation I felt as a pastor the first time a couple whose wedding I had officiated divorced. How now many churches hardly pause with when another home falls apart, and the enemy is pleased when the marriage picture of Christ's love for his church gets distorted. Body immorality, hidden sin. The story is tragic, but true. In more than one situation, the church is not growing, and they invite consultants to help them recognize their obstacles to grow. Attention is given to infrastructure, programming, staffing, and facilities. Sometimes later, the truth comes out that more significant obstacle had existed. Some in church leadership have been living in sin for months, if not years, even while doing his day-to-day ministry. How about heart and mind once again? Transfer growth diversion. Let me summarize this point. The enemy is seldom threatened when churches grow only by swapping sheep with other churches down the street or across the city. I've worked with churches that brag about their growth, but never ask the question whether they are seeing non-believers turn to Christ. Transfer growth often distracts believers from doing evangelism and thus plays into the enemy's hands. Spirit self-dependence. Some churches, I am convinced, would continue to exist for some time even if God withdrew his presence. That is, they operate in their own strength and ability, but they do it well. Often they have enough size that decline is almost impractical. Their leader are natural fixers, and they tend to fix first and pray second. Though these churches may speak passionately about the power of God, they rely more on their own power. What about spirit? Discipleship distraction. The enemy delights in churches, and they have no strategic, effective discipleship strategy. After all, these churches have no plan to teach believers how to wear the full armor of God. They frequently leave new believers to fight battles on their own, select unprepared persons for leadership, and then provide no training for those leaders. Because no one discipled them, their members often lose battles in a spiritual war they do